if you're making decisions about information, about a person or a group of people or preferences and carving things up, how do you know that that's really right? Where is the validation on that? Is the source that you receive the data an okay source? Is it approved? Are you allowed to receive that information and then utilize that to try to create value?
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, I have with me Christina Palendrano, who is the Managing Director of Client Delivery and Operations at Cognitive Inc., bringing over 30 years of experience in business, technology, and project management. She has a background that spans leading teams in financial services and data analytics. She's known for driving profitability and executing strategic client relationships. Christina has held leadership roles at institutions like Bank of New York Mellon and Ernst & Young, overseeing product development and global client implementations, which is why we're excited to have her on the show. Christina, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Devin. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I'm really excited to get into some of the work that you're doing here with Cognitive Inc. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's start with a quick little background on who you are, where you came from, and how you landed your role as Managing Director of Client Delivery and Operations.
Sure. My role, my career really started out I was a developer way back when, so a long time ago. And through developing, I became interested in project management. And so after doing development for IBM for about 5.5 years, I moved into project management, which quickly grew into working in a number of roles. You mentioned Ernst& Young's consulting firm. And that was really where I transitioned, or my first experience into consulting from being at a product company. And I really enjoyed that. And that really springboarded my career up, I would say, into executive levels of management, at which point I started working with startups, building startups, went into larger companies, back and forth, I'd say, between product companies and consulting companies, which landed me working with some of my colleagues from years ago, currently at Cognitive Inc.
Wow, quite a colorful background. Um, in all of your experience, I'm curious to see how your role in integrating and kind of building the business has evolved over time.
Yeah, it's really interesting starting on the technology side and then moving forward to the business. It's been an interesting journey and really understanding and changing that shift in thinking of technology, how to leverage technology to solve for business problems, right? At the end of the day, that's what we all want to achieve. And recognizing that there's a really good partnership that must exist with the technology organizations. And there are pockets where technology innovation provides new solutions that hadn't been thought about before. But a big part of the work is how can you leverage what already exists or is new into the market and really drive that growth to solve the different problems of the businesses that are happening, especially on the operational front, right? And so as you're building products and services, how do you make sure you're also designing those to be able to be adequately or effectively operated, not just building this thing or this product. It still has to be serviced at the end of the day, and that always seems to be an afterthought.
Yeah, the human element of all of it, the necessity for us to not only have to use the technology, but for it to be intuitive and help us be more efficient and increase productivity and all the other great things that it's meant to do. And now we're kind of facing another really tremendous technological evolvement with the advent of AI and
Yes.
machine learning and all these other tools that a lot of people are they're either nervous or excited about the prospect of what that means for business. So I'm curious to find out what your approach is to some of these new evolutions and how you're applying that in like practically in the business.
Yeah, sure. So, AI is, it is that next evolution and it is exciting. And I agree with you that in some sense, it is a little bit scary. I think probably more around the security stuff, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But on another sense, it's really helpful even as a consumer myself. Forget about solutions for other customers, right? As a solution for, looking at the solution, if somebody can make things more personalized for me and identify more value of things that might be interested in, that creates efficiency for me. So I
Mhm.
love that personally, and that's what we're trying to do for our clients as we build products and services and try to make those try to leverage that technology to be able to do that. But the flip side to that is, how do you do that in a way that is safe, secure, and validated? And I
Mm.
think that's one of the things that we're all struggling with, because there's so much information out there. And how do you know what truth is if you're making decisions about information about a person or a group of people or preferences or and carving things up? How do you know that that's really right? Where is the validation on that? Is the source that you receive the data an okay source? Is it approved? Are you allowed to receive that information and then utilize that to try to create value using that? And that to me, I think, still is at the beginning of trying to figure out how do you do that, and how do
Mm.
you do that legally. We're working with currently a number of clients and talking to them, and is you think about the financial services space, or you think about the educational space, both are which areas that we work in, and we work with companies in those industries. Privacy and security it's critical everywhere, but it's extremely critical with some of the regulatory factors. And you're talking about students and kids and information, right? Or
Mhm.
you're talking about people's financial accounts and information. And so, there's opportunities there for AI, but how do you make sure you're using it in such a way that it's safe and it's secure and you're protecting the interests of the constituents you're working with? And we're currently talking through what are those challenges? How do we solve for that? How do
Right.
we get approvals to look for the information if it's not publicly available?
Mm. Well, then we're in this new age of technology and data where our very interaction with the internet is captured and monitored and um,
Everywhere.
to what end, right? And this is the difficult thing that I think the general public just really doesn't fully understand is that um, everything, including the way that you interact with the apps, the way that you interact with the people that you're interacting with on those apps, the products and businesses that you touch, like all of that information is being kind of monitored or stored or captured somewhere. And we're nervous about what that means. What does that mean if somebody knows that we interact frequently with a makeup store? Or what does that mean if somebody knows that we frequent a park in a certain location? How is that leveraged, A, to make our lives better, or B, for the nefarious actors to do something not so great to us or to people we care about and that sort of thing. So there's a danger. Also, there is a benefit to having your information being tracked and monitored, right?
It's a huge benefit. I mean, I'm sure this happens to you. It happens to me all the time. You might be watching a YouTube channel on your television, and the ads that come up are relative to a conversation you had 30 minutes ago.
Hmm.
Because everybody's listening and they're capturing data about everything. And in a positive sense, like you mentioned a quick example, I love it. I like a certain brand of makeup and I use it. And guess what ads I get? I get ads
Right.
when they're having huge sales on that particular brand. And that's convenient for me. I don't have to go looking for it. I don't have to save anything. And it pops up and is like, hey, we have this new thing. Is this something you're interested in? So that part of it is great. But you're right. On the flip side, it's, what does that mean on the concern? How can this information be used against me down the road? But I think, like personally for me, with any information, you can do good or bad with it. And I think that brings back the how do we handle the protection side
Mhm.
of it, right? On the industry, because there's always going to be the good and the bad. I still believe the good outweighs the bad. There's positives to it. It's just how do we figure out how do we like put some guardrails around it to
Mm.
protect it in such a way that really really bad things can't happen or try to protect it as much as possible. And I mean, no matter what the information, you're talking about big information being captured, but even today, you know, people get hacked all the time. Our personal information in our computers, forget about all the stuff that we're doing
Hmm.
on a day to day basis, just accessing a site or buying something. If you're not careful, that information can get stolen and bad things will happen or could happen. Right. And so it's kind of that to the next level. And I don't have the answer, but I think there's a lot of probably people a lot smarter than myself trying to figure it out. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this to that point, um, there's always going to be people who want to get things in life easier, and sometimes that requires them doing things that go against the rules that we've established collectively. And so, if there are going to be people that are doing bad things, there also should be people who are doing good things. And so, to take on the task of properly managing data, properly managing information, and properly taking care of the information that we have and safeguarding it and all those other things, like you said, putting that guardrail on is
Yeah.
important to kind of keep us to balance it out at the end of the day, right? Because the things that people are up to are getting more and more sophisticated. I
Mhm.
just recently found an email that came to me from somebody who I thought I knew, and when I clicked into it, I looked, and the landing page that I went to, it looked super legit. And then
And
once I clicked around, they were offering me a job, is what it was. And they wanted me to submit my resume.
mhm.
And to do that, I had to log into Facebook.
Mhm.
And so it was very clever how they went about trying to capture that information, and so it's like that. It's very sophisticated. They're putting in a lot of time and effort on the backside to make sure that it looks legit on the front end. And now we're kind of charged with this task of like, okay, what do we do with this information, and how do we better protect ourselves? So when it
I
comes to, sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of the things that we're constantly doing and we're working with, we have our information security standards that we work with, the International Standards Organization, and our certifications, and we're constantly having to educate our employees about spam mails, and they are getting more sophisticated, and not just for what they're doing at work but in our own personal lives. You don't click on a link. Make sure you know who it's from. If you're not sure, check the spelling really carefully. Look at the small print. Does it make sense? Like, you have to look at, if you're really interested in something, you should never blindly click something. If it sounds interesting enough and you're really interesting, do homework, do a search. And, I do this all the time. Do a search and say, hey, is there a spam mail for this particular topic going around? Because you'll see it, it'll pop up and it's like, up, delete. Right. That one's not real. But you really have to take that little bit of time and look closely and look carefully and think before you act nowadays, both professionally and personally, because of all of the stuff that's out there. And I know that the antivirus tools and some of the endpoint management tools that are out there, they're getting smarter and they're getting up to speed, but somebody's always going to be looking at, how do I break that? How do I hack that?
Right,
Right.
right,
And so we have to, and so a big part of that, I think it's our responsibility as being leaders in this industry, is to help educate all of our people and our employees and how to best protect themselves.
right.
Um,
So this
and
is like
that's
the
going to
data
change.
stuff that you're talking about is like making sure that we're monitoring and protecting that data. And so now this is kind of a really great segue into the way that you guys are doing product development, the way that you integrate some of these services or some of these tools together to help serve your client base. So what are you doing to kind of help tie the two things together in the work that you're doing?
Sure. When we build products for our clients, most of the work that we do is all in the cloud. I don't want any of our clients' data locally, right? It's really
Mhm.
critical. And honestly, the big companies, when you talk about using Azure or AWS, right? They have millions of dollars that they spend to make sure their systems are secure, it's going to be far better than what our small company is going to be able to do. And I want to take advantage of that and leverage that and know that they're going to do everything they can to protect the work that we do. Therefore, we can do everything that we can to protect our clients' information and their data. So really leveraging, you know, those best of breed components and technologies of how we do development. And then that's a piece of it. So that's the technology that you're using and where are you doing it. And then another piece of it is, what is your process for doing your development? So you want to make sure anything you're doing with users and authentication, that you're doing that with high degrees of key codes, right? And then you want to make sure that before you're ready to deploy stuff, you're doing the right levels of security testing to make sure you're trying to identify any vulnerabilities that could be there in code, and that everything that we've done is protected. And we also recommend, that you do some vulnerability threat assessments, if possible down the road. Sometimes they're not so easy to do. Sometimes it becomes difficult when you work with different tool sets to be able to do a lot of that. But really getting through, it's not just building it and throwing it out there. It is really making sure that you're thinking about security all the way through your development process. It is just a core component of your architecture and a core component of your delivery process, and it has to be.
So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, Christine, is really sophisticated, and it's not necessarily for the everyday mom and pop sort of website stuff. This is a little bit more uh, like a larger scale. So what types of businesses benefit most from the work that you do?
We typically work in three primary industries. I mentioned two, so financial services, education technology, property technology. We
Right.
do some work in some other industries like telecom, but that's much smaller.
Hmm.
But we're working with businesses that could be small or startup businesses. That could also be companies that are receive maybe some grant funding to build out a concept that they might have.
I see.
And
Okay.
we'll work with them to actually build the MVP of their products, or minimum viable product,
Hmm.
right? Their first version of whatever it is, to kind of prove out their concept and use some of that grant money to do it. And then
Hmm.
we'll also, we also work with some medium-sized companies that are more established. They might have existing applications. Maybe they're already pretty secure, but their user experience of what they're trying to do with those applications maybe isn't the best. And they really need to take something old and bring it up to newer technology standards, maybe create a better experience for their users because some of the technologies have changed to enable you to be able to do it. So that's kind of where we play.
So your role as managing director of client delivery, what specifically do you get up to now in kind of a day-to-day thing to help further that cause?
I'm not sure that I understood that question when you say
So
get up to.
what role do you play in helping kind of integrate or manage that sort of partnership and oversee the project and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So we have, we have a portfolio of projects. So my role, it's funny if you asked the CEO of our company what my role is, he would say, "Oh, that's easy. Just keep our clients happy and keep our people happy." That's what he would
Okay.
say I do. But at the end of the day, what that really means, I get involved with clients very early on
Hmm.
when we're in the sales phase of the project. So I'm talking to them about how we do stuff, trying to understand what their real goals are. And then as we assign, we work with them and we assign a project team uh, to be able to execute the project. I'm really making sure that we're following our standard processes,
Hmm.
that I'm having regular check-ins with our clients, which to me is so important because things change on projects all the time. Life happens, and same projects are no different. Things change, scope may change, something that, especially when you're working on an MVP or minimum viable product, where it's new development or a concept, everybody thinks this way is the way it should work. And then you actually see it working that way, and it's like, oh, that's a really lousy experience. I think it needs to do this. And
Yeah.
so that happens all the time. So
Mm,
having the right processes and having the right relationship with your clients to be able to talk through those things when they happen, say, no, we need to shift direction and understand what's the impact of that. How can we still deliver on time when those things happen? How do we manage that? What does all of that mean? I spend a lot of time with our clients, kind of working through that and educating them, and
mm,
also helping for our smaller clients, helping them understand what does it mean to be a product company and how do you handle that. I've been talking about building the product, but then there is a point at which now you need to support and service it. And you might have
mm,
clients, and what happens when they email you with a problem or they put in a ticket or they call you? Then what? And how do you know things are running right? How do you know the application's up? How do you know it's responding? How do you know you don't have any errors of any sort and you're not just going to get 404 straight pop up, right? Because the
mm.
website's down or something. How do you know all of those things and helping transition them into that operational mode? So that's the client delivery side and really how I'm working with them on the operation side. I'm managing, I have human resources and security and compliance and all of those components. And those are really critical, being a consulting services based organization versus a product company.
Mm,
We are our people. And I think people in any company are the most important asset that you have anyway, even on a product company side. And so making sure all of we call them cognitives, right? That all of
yeah.
our employees and contractors and everybody that we work with, making sure that they're engaged and they're learning new things and they're working on exciting projects if that's what they choose to do,
Mm,
and that we're kind of working with them closely on understanding what are their goals and helping them achieve those as they work with us. Right? We want it to be a positive experience, but if they're happy and if they're doing what they need to be doing, then projects also seem to go much better.
yeah, I get a sense that the human element of this is really important both to you and the business and the way that you guys create your experiences. I think that's putting people first is a big part of it. To your point, sometimes you build something and it works the way that you thought it would, but it's not as great as you had hoped it would be. And so there's managing that shift and the new trajectory and getting everybody on board. And so that's a really challenging work. But when it comes to the type of businesses that you work with, do they come to you? Do you go find them, or is there some
Ah,
kind of balance in between how you approach that whole marketing engine?
sure. The acquisition side of our business it's been an interesting one. When we started out, we really started working with private equity investment firms,
Mm,
and we used to help them do some due diligence. So they might have a company they're interested in potentially investing in, and they would come to us and say, "Hey, can you take a look at them and see if it's a good investment?" Fast forward a little bit is, oh, they invested in the company has problems, they need some help, can you help them? And
mm-hmm,
that wasn't what we originally did, but that has been the growth of our uh, of how we've kind of started. So really a big part of our acquisition, what I would say the short answer is really through partnerships and relationships.
mm,
Right? So we're not necessarily going out and, cold calling or cold searching folks. But we do have relationships with private equity firms that own companies. We also have relationships with, for example, the University of Pennsylvania has some really good educational programs and educational grants and awards, and we have a good relationship with them. And so we have been working through relationships with folks that have owned or work with other companies through that. And organically, we've grown through that mechanism. I think what I would also say though is we're still relatively small, right?
right.
As we change, we're also having active conversations about how will our acquisition process and how will that need to change as we grow, because that'll
Mm,
only sustain you for so long. And I would say we're kind of in that transition and turning point of working with and talking to lead gen solutions and trying to understand, okay, how can that drive traffic to us, maybe drive some interest, and then how do we quick qualify where there's interest to say, is this a really qualified lead that we should now go spend time with this company on?
Yeah,
Hopefully the
and
answer to your question.
no, that's perfect because
Yep.
this is one of the things that we've been looking at is that when it comes to building these relationships, the human element of it is very, very important. And to be optimized in the way that you intentionally put yourself out there to, attract people into the business, it becomes really difficult. And one of the most difficult things that I think a lot of businesses face is the new task of becoming a media company at the same time as you are, a data services company or a
Yes.
financial company or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to still be creating something of value, building a
Yeah.
community around that thing that you've created of value, and then nurturing those relationships over a long period of time. Because this isn't like a snap decision that you make while you're standing in line at Walmart and you grab the extra chocolate bar that you didn't need.
Right.
It takes time, it takes
It does-
trust, it takes integrity. There's a lot of elements that go into making a bigger decision like this, especially when, to your point, it's investment or um, there's a significant investment into the business, and people really need to be more thoughtful about how they plan those things out. And having an expert be able to map it out in a way that makes sense,
Yeah.
super valuable. So there's a lot that goes into that. And one of the common things that I've found too is that relationship building is one of those things you just can't quite systemize. You can't
Yes.
really it's a difficult thing because you still have to go out intentionally meet people. You can maybe go to events or on LinkedIn, you can add your connections, or, you can run into people where you're already doing business. The referrals is another really, really big part of it. So
You
when it comes to, the bigger plans that you guys have, you mentioned that you're exploring some of these solutions. That's probably because you're aiming at growing. What are some of the big goals you guys are aiming at?
I mean, a big part of it is, I think there's two. Obviously, revenue growth is always one, and
Hmm.
it's been, gosh, the climate hasn't, the business climate just has been a little rocky, right? The last couple of years, and a little rough. I think
Yeah.
for everybody, especially in services, at least with the other services companies and folks that I talk to, for sure. But also global. Most of our clients, pretty much all of our clients, are U.S. based, yet we're a global organization. You know, we have we have offices in Spain, Serbia, and India. Yet our clients are still all in the U.S. So we really have been spending a lot of time over the last year and a half, certainly like courting prospects globally and in other countries. And so hopefully soon, knock on wood, right? Keep my fingers crossed a little bit. That will change shortly.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things in progress that we've been working on. But like you said, it's all relationships. It takes time and that trust and integrity, which is two of our values, but that really, that takes a lot of time to build that. I think it was really difficult during, the whole pandemic time when you couldn't do it. But even breaking into a new country and breaking into a new industry, all of those are really, really tough to do when really people don't know your name, they don't know who you are. And it is very difficult and it takes time. And so you have to have some patience and you
Hmm.
have to stay true. And I think you also, you need to be really transparent and honest about the things that you can do and the things that you can't do. We're a small consulting organization. Between the leadership team, we have, a century or more of experience working in a lot of different industries, but that doesn't mean our company can do everything. There is stuff we don't do well, and we have to be honest about those things and honest with prospects and existing clients. And they've come to us and it's like, can you do this for us? It's like, this isn't really our thing. We might be able to help you find somebody, but no. And have the courage and the diligence to be able to say no and kind of stick to your core values is so important, because that could be a big distraction if you try to go down one of those rabbit holes, and it could distract you from what you really need to be focusing on.
One of my mentors put it this way: it's probably bad business to have a vegan steakhouse.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
it's two different crowds of people, and although it might be nice to try to serve both, it makes it really difficult for you to be a specialist in something when you're trying to please all people. And so I totally understand that. That the challenge of like, yeah, this is a thing that we might be able to dabble in, but it's not what we're focused on, and we got to maintain our focus. And that's a bold thing to do nowadays, especially given, like you said, the state of the economy, the state of how things are, and what we're up to, and how we're kind of innovating. Um, it's a mess out there right now, and there's a
Yes.
lot going on, and it's happening so quickly, and it's very
Mhm.
difficult to keep up. And so it's good to have partners like you out there who are, in the on the front lines, kind of in the mess, making sure that what's going on is going to be beneficial to everybody. And so I applaud the work that you're doing. Christina, this has been wonderful. You've been very generous with your time and your wisdom, and I'm very grateful for that. As we close out the show, I wonder if we can leave on a high note here. Imagine that there's somebody else who's kind of out there up to it in a very similar role, who's facing some challenges. What sort of advice might you offer them to help keep them going?
I'd say first and foremost, be true to yourself. And I think it's just to spend a moment, make sure you're spending enough time listening, right? Whether you're listening to your people or you're listening to your clients, to make sure you're listening and listening to understand,
Mm,
because they're trying to tell you something and they may or may not articulate that well. But I think if you can get that, then you can kind of move to, okay, how can I solve for that? Or is this something I want to solve for? Because maybe you don't. But it all starts with really, really listening and understanding. And I think that that is huge. That's what I would say.
yeah, really powerful advice. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Either my email. Do you share that or do I need to share it here?
We can link to it in the show notes if you'd like.
Oh, that would be great. So my email at work would be great, and that's or LinkedIn as well would be the
Okay,
best ways to reach out. And I welcome anyone if they'd like to reach out to have a discussion, a guidance, assistance. Happy to help.
wonderful. So we'll put that there so that anybody watching or listening will be able to find you easily. On
Great.
that note, if anybody watching or listening wanted to get in touch with me and my team for any of your marketing or AI needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this conversation, and I will see you in the next.